Hello there. Very good evening and welcome to Let's Talk Politics. I'm your host, Eddie Lane, and of course, as we always say, this program is dedicated to bring to you information on the programs, policies, and initiatives of the People's Progressive Party Civic government in office. And of course, we also use the opportunity to respond and to dispel the misinformation, lies, etc., that are coming from the opposition camps. And of course, we address their racist, divisive rhetoric that they continue to spew on a daily basis. This evening, I'm joined by the Honorable Priya Manickchand, the Minister of Education. And tonight's discussion will focus heavily on the Because We Care cash grant for public school students. Minister Manickchand, good evening and welcome to the program. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. How you doing, Eddie? I'm very glad to be on with you and your audience. Be very happy to talk about this grant and to answer any questions that persons may have on it.
All right. So if I before I bring you in, Minister, to start the discussion, I wanted to just share to give some context to our discussion this evening. And I mean, most Guyanese are aware that the Because We Care cash grant program it's not a new program. It's a program that was started under the previous People's Progressive Party Civic Administration, but was discontinued by the coalition when they took office in 2015. The it was $10,000 at that time when it was started under the PV. It is now going to be $15,000, and also that will be well, not just the cash grant, which is one aspect. There is also the school uniform voucher, and the school uniform and supplies grant, as it's called, another $4,000. So it's $19,000 per child will be in the hands of each public school student. This amounts to about $3.2 billion dollars. This is $3.2 billion dollars being placed in the hands of Guyanese parents of public school students to use to better their lives and to make the environment in which these students are going to operate much more comfortable. Minister, this is significant. This is a massive injection into the economy in the first place.
It is. It's and it's going to make a lot of families far more comfortable than they were. It's really a big hand to persons who have at the back of their heads the reality that we are going to be returning to schools sooner rather than later. And that when we do, they're going to have to outfit their children and spend money that they haven't had to spend over the last year and a half. And so it's really our way of helping. This is something we promised already, right? We promised this when we were on the campaign trail. We said very clearly that we were going to restore the cash grant. And the reason we had to restore it is because this is something the PPPC started in 2014. And it was abolished by the APNU as soon as they got into office in 2015, which was incidentally a very deceptive act because in 2014, the calls were, we don't think you should give only public school children. You should give private school. And if we were there, we would be giving the private school children. There was a call from the floor of the House that we hope this is going to be continuous with the PPP. And, if we were there, we would give far more and things like that. And then as soon as the AP and UAFC got into government, they just scrapped the whole program, took away this money from students, children, from families, from persons or education system. And it was really unconscionable. And so we said we would start it back because not because we want to check a box, but because we know how very helpful this can be and how very helpful it was. And we want to be able to restore that kind of assistance to parents so that kind of give you a leg up. We're going to provide the schools and train teachers and textbooks and so on, but we know you would like to outfit your children. We know you would like to send them to school. We know you would like to prepare for them and help them. And so we thought this was our way of directly transferring some of the state's resources into our parents and hands, into families. And that's what we did. So we're very happy to be able to do it. It's a large undertaking logistically, But yeah, we're gonna be starting this tomorrow actually in Essequibo.
And Minister, I recall because when this program started under the PPP, I can recall vividly. I guess you may recall. I attended quite a number of them as a reporter covering them, and I recall having conversations with a lot of parents at the national park, where one of the distributions were taking place, and many other parts of the country. And you heard stories from parents how much this at that time how much this initiative meant to them, how it was going to improve the lives of the children. I recall a story of one parent who I think she had about 4 or 5 children uh, in the school system, and she was able to use the monies that she collected to move them to transition those kids from pit latrine to a in-house toilet if you want, or washroom, well, bathroom facility. There were parents, I recall one parent being able to use that money to repair a step that the children were using that would have collapsed. But because of the pressures of having to send the kids to school, she couldn't afford to really do. And those are some of the stories you were hearing. This time around, this cash grant is being rolled out in a COVID environment where many parents would have lost their jobs and they're struggling to get their parents into school. I'm saying all of this because late in this discussion, I want us to have some amount of some conversation on the objections and the opposition that you're seeing to this initiative by the people who took it away in the first place when it was there. So the stories of parents and how they welcome initiatives of this nature, and then the broader picture of the macro picture that is of how much it's injecting into the local economy.
Yeah, it's not, and that's why we talk about the fancy things like macro economic picture that it's injecting in. You can't always measure what these kinds of interventions do in numbers, Eddie. When you allow a single mother, to feel like she can provide a little bit more and make her children a little bit more equal to their counterparts in their classroom because she can put a toilet in the house, like you said, or because she can provide running water through a pump system, or she can give her children a bicycle to ride to school on, or a tablet. When you provide that kind of comfort and assurance to that family, we can't measure it in dollars and cents all the time. That kind of happiness and wellness and feelings of confidence, they translate also into people being able to produce more and do more in your country and so on, that we all benefit from. So it's I the good thing is, so I was busy as you can imagine, really locked down off social media, really busy over the last couple of days, just trying to make sure we're ready to roll this out in a way that is not confusing and chaotic, and smoothly, and that we don't have parents waiting too long and so on. And so I missed some of the commentary, and I came on today and I saw that, just very senior opposition members, actually MPs, nobody else was, had criticisms on the program itself, and the criticisms were really idiotic and stupid and infantile, based on nothing substantive. But we've come to expect that of the opposition. Is very little substance that will come out of anything they say. You had some criticism about a poster. If the children that were on the poster, which is so stupid. The children on the poster are not the people who are going to be getting the grant. The grant is going to be given to every single Guyanese. So let me make this very clear from the get go. Every single Guyanese child who is registered in a public school or who has applied for entrance into the public school, and that application came to the government before June the 30th, will benefit from this $19,000 cash grant. So if you're a nursery, primary, secondary, you're going to benefit from this cash grant. Now, we are not going to be asking parents how you voted. We will not ask parents how they pray. We will not look at ethnicity. We're not going to look at which region you come from. Once the only eligibility criteria here to receive this grant from the government is that the student is in a public school, or was is applying to come to a public school and made that application before the 30th of June. That's it. That's the grant. And so the I mean, it's really dumb to criticize a poster when in a few short hours we're going to show how are not discriminating just by service. So I don't think they're thinking it through. And I really still can't comprehend what the other one's criticism was. She's usually incoherent, so I wasn't too sure what that criticism was about.
We will talk about that incoherent comment in just a bit. But, Minister, the thing is, I always believe that the things people say about, whatever is before them is because it's a reflection of how they think and how they see everything. If you see things in a negative sense, you tend to speak to it in a negative sense. And because the PNC, the APNU AFC, sees everything through racist lens, that is why you will find that kind of criticism coming from them. They looking at a poster that maybe a few stock photos were used to prepare, to go out there to say that, you know, the people on the poster are the only people who will benefit, or it's a demonstration of how the program will be rolled out. Um, is because that's how they see things, through racist lens, because that's the only thing they can sell to unsuspecting Guyanese who may want to go down the racist line. I know for a fact, and I think every single Guyanese with children in the public school system, maybe from 2014, 2013 up, will tell you that when the program was rolled out, that the parents were able to access the grant regardless of their ethnicity, or regardless of who the matter of fact, you didn't know who they voted for, because it's not a requirement. It's not like you're being asked who you voted for and then you say APNU. So okay, even though it's APNU, let's give you the grant. You come and you access. The schools are generating that list, I think, to some extent,
Yeah.
Minister, if I could
Not to
recall.
some extent, fully. The schools are saying to us, based on our request from the schools, they're giving to us their register and getting that so that the names of the children are coming from the register in the schools kept by teachers and head teachers. That's where we're getting the names from. And that's those are the people who are being informed about collecting the grant. So it's been it's the so let's discuss this frankly, since it became apparently a little bit of an issue. Though I don't prepare posters. I mean, that's people who are very helpful to us to do it. The posters used were of two. The pictures used were of two Amerindian children, and you know why they had pictures of Amerindian children, and they have a preponderance of pictures of Amerindian children, like a lot, right now, and that's because when we came into government in August, there was zero education service to the Amerindian communities. Those kids were going without any kind of engagement because they have no internet, they have no device, they have no WhatsApp. So I spent an enormous amount of time in those communities from then to now. So those are the pictures we have. We don't have we apparently they didn't, address their minds, and I'm really glad about that. I'm glad that I work with young people who did not address their minds to that kind of narrowness. Here's what I say: you would very, very rarely find me declaring to you whether I'm racist or not, or declaring that I'm not a racist. Because, in my view, people see you through their lens. And so it doesn't really matter what we say, it's how we behave. And I believe, just like the Bible teaches us, that you should show your commitment and faith through your actions, that you should judge me through my actions. And those are, for me, always going to be non discriminatory and equal, and you'll see service equitably, because that's who I am. So I don't bother usually to make declarations. But at the same time, if all you can see when you look at a poster is not, oh, where should these children go? How can I advise my the people who vote for me or who support me where to pick up this grant? All you can see on that poster is race. It really speaks to the person who's making those observations more than anything else. Here is the problem I have. If you can't love Guyanese children enough to say you're entitled to this grant, or you can't like these two particular children who are on this poster, then you really can't serve nationally. Because if you can't like children, you can't like, if you don't like these two, or you don't like some, you don't like any. And so it really speaks to why the APNU is unfit, and how people saw that when they voted in March of last year. I wouldn't waste too much time on them. I don't think their criticisms have taken traction at all. I know that Coretta MacDonald from the Guyana Teachers Union, who is attempting, in my view, to hijack that union and use it for political purposes, spent an enormous amount of time today trying to discourage persons from receiving the grant and from participating in a way that would make it smooth and successful. Ironically, these are the same people who will do what they did with vaccine. They're going to go and they're going to take these services and they're going to benefit from them, and then they're going to ask ordinary Guyanese who really need this kind of service not to benefit from same. So I believe the people of this country are sensible. I believe they can distinguish between what is a service meant for them and what's a political cry and call. And I don't think people will be used as pawns. There's um, a level of maturity that Guyanese have come to, and I'm very, very proud of. I think people will vote when they go to the polls, however they want to vote. But in the intervening 5 years, they have very little time for this kind of, or patience, or appetite for that sort of stupidity being pounded into their heads every day, all day.
Because the reality is, and I think is the thinking of the PNC or the APNU, AFC, whatever you want to call them, is that they always see things through a particular lens. And I talked about the racist lens, but then they also look at things, and this is how they implemented their quote unquote policies for the 5 years, where they were not even their own supporters. They weren't focused on the poor people of this country, regardless of who they voted for, or whether they were Afro Guyanese or Indo Guyanese, or whether they were their supporters or not. They concerned nothing about the poor people of this country and the average Guyanese. So they were seeing things through a particular lens, looking out for the interests of the elites that surrounded them. The reason why maybe they didn't follow through with this Because We Care cash grant is because maybe there weren't opportunities there for some of them to steal. Because as far as I'm concerned, all they did for the 5 years was looking at what they can do to benefit themselves, whether they are going to build a road and how much somebody is going to get out of that. So it is it is hard to comprehend. It's extremely difficult to comprehend. You're going to raise objections. You're going to try to smear a program that is going to put $3.2 billion into the pockets of poor average Guyanese who have kids in the public school, who maybe some of them outside of this wasn't sure where exactly they would have gotten the monies to buy school uniform, to buy books, to buy bags, to buy shoe for the children when school reopens, if it's in September or in the very near future. Outside of this, many of them may not have been able to do that because they don't have a job as a result of the situation they're in with the COVID 19, or maybe their incomes have been reduced. Many of the beneficiaries of this cash grant maybe would have found it extremely difficult
Mm-hmm.
at this point to maybe pay for the internet for the kids. Maybe when the school reopens, it would have been difficult for them to be able to send the child to school because they're hardly working and they don't have money to buy maybe food or to pay transportation. How
Yeah,
could you object to something like that? I just can't comprehend that.
yeah. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's extremely bizarre. This grant, look, we you could get a really good tablet device for $15,000 that would really allow us to do blended education in the way that would be effective, in a way that would be effective, and still have change left back, $4,000. The if the criticism, or the only I see Coretta McDonald again saying that teachers should not be involved. Well, here's the thing. For the last 5 years, teachers were involved in distributing the uniform voucher, albeit $2,000 less than they're getting now. We're giving $4,000 to AP, and you gave $2,000 only for uniforms. And teachers were involved in. There wasn't a hue and cry at that time. There wasn't any criticism about it at that time. So it's a really foolish thing. I could tell you the majority of teachers in this country, the majority of head teachers in this country will do anything that is good for their children and the parents of those children. They go above and beyond to make sure their children get service. um and so we'll see, we will see. I believe we'll see teachers turning out to give this grant because they know what it means to these families. Let us not forget that teachers are going to be heavily served here also, for in several ways. Teachers themselves will get this grant where they have children. Teachers will be assisted if you have a child who has a device in your class and you want to uh, give homework on the device. It's going to help that teacher tremendously. Teachers who know very well how children who are properly resourced, how much easier it makes their work. So I don't expect to see anything out of it. I see some persons asking why it is that we're not giving, or somebody asked earlier, where would nursery students get their grants? So here's the thing. We've put schedules up for, and we will be publishing schedules publicly. It's a very open process for the entire country about where you can go, and parents need to pay attention to that because it might not be at your school, it might be at another school close by to where your child's school is. And so you need to look to see where your child's school is clustered. Now, nursery students, year two nursery students who ought to have gone into, or who will be going into grade one in September, whether face to face or virtually, those students will be served through their nursery school. So you have to look to see where the nursery school is asked to go. So three sets of children will be served at the nursery school: first year, second year, and the new intake. So even if you didn't get placed into a primary school as yet, your the place you were catered for is through your nursery school. If you were placed in a primary school, you still get served through the nursery school. So that's just a bit of information. For I saw a question there on your the live on Facebook that someone was asking. Somebody else is asking why not mention, why not serve private schools, and that's been a fairly popular comment in the last few weeks. And I don't think it's an unjustified comment, but let me tell you where we are. Let's address it. Traditionally in this country, from the beginning of private education in Guyana until today, we have never, as a country, invested public funds into private education. We've never done it. So it's not as though we're changing something now. It's never happened. Um, and that could be for several reasons. There are policies in the world. Well, different countries deal with this differently. The whole issue about whether public funds should be invested in private education is a worldwide question that invites debates and on policies and so on. And different countries do different things. What we have done here in Guyana, traditionally, historically, all through the years, is we do not give any grants to private school children. We do not give any textbooks to private school children. We do not give school feeding programs to private schools. We have never done it. And so it's not something we're taking away, it's just something we've never done. Could the country change its mind? Yes, they could. But at this point, we have not changed that policy. So that's not a Priya policy, it's just a policy the country has practiced over the last, since private education was introduced. If we are going to change that policy, then we have to change some new things too. Well, not change, but we have to introduce some new monitoring, and we'll probably do that even whether or not we change that policy. For example, right now, we know who's on the register at schools. We know who at public schools. We know how many children are in these schools. We know who is on the register. We know, and there's someone responsible for providing a register that is accurate, that accurately reflects who's in the school. At this point, we have no um, record of who are in private schools. We don't know if we ask for a register of students, if when we see 500 names, if there are 500 children in that school, or if there are 300 and the list is padded by two. And we don't know if there are 500 children in the school, that it is these 500 represented on this list that's given to us. So we have to be very careful when you're dealing with public funds. You have to be responsible for, some transparency on how that is done. And I'm not saying it's impossible if this country decides in the future that it wants to invest in private education through public funds in a specific way, because we do that in a general way, and I'll tell you how just now, then we can do that. But at this point, we don't have those records. We have never kept those records. And so it would become a bit of a problem. So I hope people could understand that a little bit. That is not to say private schools go without input from the government or assistance. As soon as we came into office this year, last year, one of the first things we did was to remove taxes that private schools had to pay, specifically private schools had to pay. We removed those taxes so that the school would have, the administration of the school would have less to spend. And we hoped if they had less to spend, that they would pass down the benefits to their parents, charge them less fees, maybe give them a grant, maybe give them textbooks for free, pass the benefit down to their parents. We removed from the bills of private schools VAT on their electricity, VAT on their water bill. Now, that is a saving to the private school. We hoped that that saving would be passed down to the parents and students. When we train teachers, we don't train teachers for the public education system. Most of the teachers in the private schools have been trained. All of the teachers in the private schools who are trained have been trained by the government of Guyana. There are some teachers who are not trained, and that's a whole different story. But all of the teachers who are trained by the government of Guyana at the cost, at using public funds. So it's not as though nothing is done. I'm just saying traditionally we have never made that we've been giving uniform vouchers for years. This started under the Bar Jack Dale presidency, sometime just before 2006, in the 2001-2006 government, and we've never given that to private schools. We have been doing school feeding to hundreds of students. That again started under the Jagdeo presidency. We've never given that to private schools. So I'm just saying that I'm not saying it is something we cannot do in the future if this is a direction the country wants to go in. But I'm saying at this moment, it's not what we have done. And while I understand the call and the request, and frankly, who doesn't want $19,000? A lot of money, and it could come in very handy. But we have those constraints that we're faced with.
And in addition to what you mentioned, Minister, one has to recognize, I mean, as a country, we are a developing country. We don't have unending resources. So as a country, sometimes you have to be able to balance your resources. You have to prioritize. So and the minister made the point that there might very well come a time when Guyana is in a financial position to be able to maybe give grants to all students, but one has to recognize that at this point in time, based on the resources of the country, you obviously would have to prioritize. And naturally, I mean, I don't mean this in any bad way, but most of the parents who are sending their children to, and I'm saying most in a guided way, are sending their children to public school are parents who maybe many of them can't afford private institutions. There are some who I know, and I agree, sometimes make the kind of sacrifices necessary, maybe to send their kids to private school because they somehow think that there is a better opportunity for them. But one has to recognize that as a country, we have to be able to manage the resources that we have in a prudent way to ensure that we can't just focus on one area. You have to look at the needs of almost all sectors. So that's the other dimension to what the minister mentioned. I wanted to move to
Yeah.
before
I
because
mean,
I wanted to talk. Go ahead.
yeah,
Go
let
ahead.
me just say, I am aware that there are many parents who look, every parent who chooses private school has to make a sacrifice because it's, an expenditure that you would not have had if you're going to public school. But it's a choice made with an understanding that comes from historical basis that you're not at this point. No, when you choose private, you know that you don't get these grants. And so frankly, it's not in the budget. So if we were to say we're going to do this for private schools, we'd have to get a supplementary pass, and it would cost a significant amount of money because of the numbers. But like I said, the country's policy throughout the years since private education started, including when parents registered their children for private education, something they knew was that they do not get this any kind of benefit. You don't get textbooks, you don't get pencils if we share them out, you don't get school feeding, you don't get the uniform voucher grant. This is something we've known. I'm not saying it can't change. I'm just saying that it is not, we're not doing something differently this year. We're doing exactly what we've always done. I do understand why when it's this amount of money that they're going to be calls for a widening of the net. But it's a net, it's a social safety net, and it's supposed to capture, or the majority of people that it captures, supposed to be people who need some social buttressing. And if you were only to economic help, and if you were to just do that in a peripheral way, one can fairly assume, although it's not always justified. Like I said, I am telling you, there are people who make sacrifices, but the people who probably need to be in that net more are the people who are currently beneficiaries of the grant.
Minister, I wanted us to spend some time, or matter of fact, I want us to spend some time on talking about the process itself and how is going to be rolled out. Before I come to that, what I want to do briefly, I want us to deal with a matter because this is the kind of misinformation that you have being, shared all over the place, and you talk about the coherent statement by one person. I had a few listens and I was able to maybe decipher a little bit of what um, she was saying, Annette Ferguson. And she's somehow giving the impression that the issue of school grants, is not something that is happening anywhere else in the world. Because she is saying that no governor where you see governments doling out public funds to school children and all. And that's a serious statement that she's making in the first place to she's publicly objecting to public funds going to poor people who have children in school.
Yeah,
That's the
which
first
is
thing.
bizarre. I mean, is that the reason the AP and you didn't give it because nowhere else in the world it's happening? Because that's first of all, if you can't do something
Yes, I
because nowhere
did.
else is doing it, then you are unable to serve your people innovatively. But that's not true. Large numbers of countries across the world directly transfer all kinds of benefits, including cash, food, um, uh, medicine, other resources. In fact, there are a large number of Latin American countries who directly give cash grants that are conditional. This grant is not conditional as yet. Again, I'm saying these policies can change. For this year, it is not conditional. Other Latin American countries are do it conditionally. You have to have X number of attendance or X percentage of attendance, and you have to have had all your vaccines that you are required to have for that period before you were able to access some of these grants. We have not made this grant conditional in Guyana. In year 2021, it is not conditional. But Annette is clearly not very familiar with what happens in the world if she's speaking of what like I said, I wasn't sure what she was speaking about. But if you deciphered enough to figure out that's what she meant, then I'm saying she's not very sensible anyway. So it's hard to discern what it is she's speaking of, what it is she's trying to communicate, what is it she is complaining about. It cannot be that the children of Guyana are going to be given $19,000 each by a government. Um, or is the complaint that because she knows of no other government giving cash grants, that this government shouldn't give cash grants? I mean, is she willing to tell her people and the people of this country that they should not receive this grant? Is she herself going to be receiving this grant? I mean, did she take the vaccine and tell other ordinary Guyanese they should not take the vaccine? Is she repeating that here? I don't think people should listen to the APNU AFC for any kind of guidance that will improve or enhance their lives or make them happy in any way. That would be a disaster. These are people who do one thing with their own lives that is beneficial to them, such as take scholarships for themselves and then complain when we try to give scholarships to thousands of Guyanese people, such as take vaccines for themselves so that they can live and be healthy and thrive, and complain when or discourage ordinary Guyanese from taking those vaccines. These are not people that can be trusted. They should not be listened to. And I believe the population is very firmly on board that understanding that they shouldn't really bother with that much.
Interestingly, Minister, I think people like Annette and the others don't recognize that there's this thing that is called the World Wide Web, where you can easily go and quickly get information to debunk some of the lies that the others sometimes. So I'm looking here at a quick Google search on school grants. I am seeing the United States, their school grants. I am seeing Scotland and many other parts of the UK, their school grants. And school grants take different forms. There are school grants where there's direct transfer, cash transfers to the students, to their parents. There are instances where um, the study activities of children are being funded. Maybe the funds going into the school and they're able to access books, they're able to access hot meals, etc. So the grants usually take different forms. And the grants are dependent on the economics, or I shouldn't say the economics, but the situation in a particular country with regards to the economic status of citizens, various levels of citizens. And internally you will be able to determine whether it's better to transfer direct transfers to parents of children, or whether you can provide the services that the same monies will go to fund. So to say blanketly that there is no this is not something that is happening around the world, is either of two things. Is either plain
But so
ignorance,
what? But
or
Eddie,
you want
supposing it's not happening. But so what? So what? Let's assume Annette is right. Supposing this has happened nowhere else in the world. it, that means Guyanese children shouldn't benefit from it if the Guyanese people have a sensible, caring government who could find an innovative way to provide this to their citizens. When we did the LCDS, that was a model to the world. It wasn't happening in the world. We did it. And then we became a model, so much so that Barjack there was named champion of the earth because he championed for the earth, for the globe, a particular thing that became a model people could follow. Guyana has been used as a model in the continent of Africa, in Asia, all over for um how we can use nutrition in school as a way to see better outcomes of both attendance as well as results. We have been used and studied, and that's because, like I said, the PPC government introduced that into this country, and we did it in a way that was different from everybody else in the world. We didn't say, oh, we can just cook the food in a baker shop and send it in. We created village economy. So in the Amerindian villages, it's the women who are doing the cassava bread and making their own peanut butter and that kind of thing. So we are known and we're very proud of doing things in the world, doing things in Guyana that are new to the world. But unfortunately, this is not one of them. So I don't know what the complaint is really.
It is just Annette being Annette, and being a member of the PNC or APNU AFC, where they just wake up every morning and they just, as we usually say in the countryside, they just prattle. They don't care what they say. They just talk, without giving it any thought. But so much for these people who seem to be very much anti-poor, um, anti-people. I want us to spend a few minutes to talk about the process. The process starts tomorrow. The rollout of
So the
this exercise
process,
starts.
yes, it starts tomorrow and we don't stop until we serve every primary, secondary, and nursery student in the public sector. And you know, Eddie, part of the reason they might have stopped this thing is they don't know how to manage to be able to give this kind of money and benefit to people, but also because it's hard. It's physically difficult to go all over the country and roll this out in a smooth way that is not chaotic and that makes people get it and so on. So we're parents are to ask to look at the schedules that we've published to see where your child's school will be served. So even if you're going to X nursery, it might not be at that nursery school. It might be at the closest primary school. Or if you're in a secondary, if your child is going to a secondary school, because we have CXE and CSEC happening right now, we might not be doing it in the secondary school. We might be doing it in the primary school, um, just close by. So we ask parents first. The first thing to do is to look at the schedule to see where your child is going to be, where we're going to serve you. Then to see the date, the day, and the time. So we might say the 14th at 9 o'clock or the 15th at 10 o'clock. So you have to look at that to know where to turn up. And when you turn up, we ask you to bring along with you your ID card, your or passport or driver's license, some form of ID, so that the person giving you the money, and this is all for transparency purposes, could look at this card and look at the person, say, same person, and this is the parent of this child. So we're giving the money to the right person to make sure we don't give it to the wrong people and that the right parents don't get it. If you don't have an ID, particularly and we know this is the case for many, a pictorial ID, then someone senior in the village or community would have to identify you. The head teacher could say, look, she doesn't have an ID, but we have been dealing with this person as the parent for this child for the last 5 years. She comes to our meetings, she talks to us, she brings the child to school. Or a tushao could say, I know this person, they're the parent of this child. Or a pastor or pandit or meiji in the village, so someone could identify and the parent. And then it's very simple. We'll look at the list, the register, say you are the parent for these three children. Here are would be your $57,000. Could you kindly sign here? And parent goes home and makes a choice about how he or she, or together as a family, they can use this $57,000 to better prepare their children for the next upcoming school year.
Minister, I'm seeing, and maybe you might be able to address it. I think
Grants and school grants take different forms.
Go on, go on.
yes, the parents are asking those who are registering children into nursery school for the first time whether they are qualified. I think that you have made it clear earlier that all students, whether they are
Yeah.
now entering the system, if you can just
No, no,
reiterate.
no, no. Let me talk about that a little bit. If you are registering your student, or if a student is coming into the school for the first time, if a student is coming to school for the first time, that student needed to have applied, well, the parent of the student, or have been registered on or before the 30th of June. So that is a little bit of a condition. All children who have been in school, right now we have 172,000 children on our register. If you were in grade 4 last year, you don't have to register again. You don't have to register for the grant. We have you on the register. We're catering for you. It's really the new intake, like nursery children, and in some distant places, grade 1 children. Um, you needed to be registered before the 30th of June. And we had massive drives to get parents to come and register. I saw entire regions, Region 10 even used the grant as an incentive to say, please get registered because this grant is coming up soon. And if you're not registered, you won't be able to get it. We have to have a cutoff, Eddie, because this is not, we don't walk with an indefinite sum of money and we're just sitting there waiting to give it out. We have to know exactly um, how many persons are to be catered for at a particular location and so on. So if someone made the application on or before June 30th, and that's the latest we could have gone, that's 2 weeks ago, then they would be entitled to this grant.
Minister, another thing I saw mentioned in one of the articles that were published on this program is that, and maybe you can explain again, there might be parents who, for unavoidable reasons, cannot maybe attend one of the activities, the upcoming activities, to be able to access the grant. What plans are in place for those parents should they want to uplift maybe at a later date or so? And does
Right.
they, if there is a later date, if it is going to capture maybe those parents who are now registering who have not been able to reach the June 30th date?
No, to the latter. So if someone doesn't, we first of all, we're trying very, very hard to stay for a long extended period in these locations. So tomorrow we are going to be in I think 9 locations at the same time from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon because we want to give people a long time to be able to come. Um and we can't go later than 5 o'clock, but we're encouraging parents to come when you see your time on the schedule because that is a guaranteed way of getting this grant. Now, if people miss that date, there is going to be another date much later. We'd have to finish the entire exercise before we're able to go back into communities. And there's probably going to be one other date at some point much later on in the year where persons will be asked perhaps to go to the regional office and pick up the money. So we won't be in your community. What we're trying to do right now is come as close as possible to your home without walking house to house and give you this grant. But if it is that you miss this time, we won't be able to do that again. So you'll have to leave where you are and go to the region office. And sometimes that's long distances away from where people live and it's expensive and so on. So we really would hope that parents don't put their themselves to that kind of expense and hassle. And so if you can't come tomorrow or you can't come whenever we're in your community, then you can authorize someone to come. And the authorization is very simple. You say, I, Priya Manickchand, parent of X child, of X class, of X school, with ID number XYZ, hereby authorize Mary Jane with ID number of ABC to uplift this grant on my behalf. And then, of course, the person you're authorizing would have both your ID and their ID when they come, and they'll be able to get that grant for you. So we know some people, with the best intention, they won't be able to make it. So we've put that in place, and we're hoping people use that as a means of collecting.
Minister, I think we're almost out of time. I don't know if there is anything else you want to add in terms of the process, but I want to end on the note that and to remind people that, look, this is an initiative that the government has conceptualized. It was in place, it was removed. The questions why it was removed is still a question to be answered by the previous government. The reality is it has been restored, it has increased, and I know there is a plan to increase this incrementally until it gets to maybe $50,000 or so. Um, but look, you judge for yourself. The housing program of this government is being criticized. These are being criticized by people who didn't really give any house lots, are criticizing us for giving house lots. And then you hear the argument, oh, you're discriminating, you're not giving Afro Guyanese. Today there was a massive housing drive in Linden. I think 400 persons were able to access house lots. Linden received a new road. An area that is predominantly APNU AFC supporters, but that doesn't matter to the PUP because after the elections, when the PUP was elected, has always been the modus operandi, if you want, of the PUP, that we work to serve Guyanese, regardless of who you voted for. After elections, the elections are over. So the housing program is being criticized. The cash grant program is being criticized. The uniform voucher program will be criticized, even though they were giving $2,000. It will be criticized. These are the very people, and you would recall that they had conditions. You had to pass a means test many years ago under the PNC to access your old age pension. But they were still criticizing when the PPP was increasing old age pension incrementally, and there was no means test. There were no requirements. All you needed to be is a Guyanese citizen, 65 years, and you're qualified for the pension. These people continue to criticize, and when you look at Coretta McDonald, this is the same lady that was beating pots on the road, on the Apnu, because teachers were they were ignoring teachers. She was busy, and that clip can easily surface of her criticizing them. Now she's in bed with the PNC, but she was always in bed apparently with the PNC. She's coming here, hypocrite, trying to criticize programs that the PNC didn't even think about. They were nowhere close to. So, Minister, on that note, I'll give you a chance to close the program.
Yeah, so Eddie, the best way I think to answer the few inane criticisms that you would get from persons who wish they could be with us and be doing what we're doing would really be to just commit to service. That's my mantra. And make sure we serve everybody equitably and fairly and efficiently. And that's what we're going to do here. Every child is going to get this grant from the public sector, from the public schools. That will amount to over 172,000 children. 172,000 children will get this grant. Um, Large numbers of families will benefit from an input that they would not have gotten for the last 5 years, and they would not have gotten had we not come back. Um, and so we are saying to people, don't be distracted by people who have nothing better to offer you than abusive, infantile, meme like comments. These are not, I mean, it's not leaders. That's people running a little teenage pack somewhere. They got a little interest group or whatever. You're looking for serious leadership, you can get it from us. You're looking for serious inputs about how your families and your children can do better, you can get it from us. And we commit to continue to doing that. We are not closed to hearing from you how we can better our service. And so we're always listening and hearing persons and trying to make it better. And that's what we'd like from you. So we're very glad to be able to bring this program. We're going to be in Essequibo and Palmeroon on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On Saturday, we're in the like one Wakenham and the other islands in the Essequibo River, Saxicali and Morrishi and Lanabali and those places. On Sunday, we're at Carmat and Garden Table, Mortis, Mycone, Perth, those areas. On Tuesday, we're also in Region 5. Well, Wednesday is a holiday. On Thursday and Friday, we'll be in Region 10. And then the following week, we'll be in Region 6. So we have a program that is mapped out. We're not leaving any on 23rd, 24th, 25th, we're in Region 9. 26th to I think the 29th, we're in Region 1. So we're just all over the country trying to do this and do it with great pleasure for the people that we swore to serve.
Thank you so much, Minister, for joining me this evening. I think we've shared a lot of information with members of the public, and I know for a fact that persons who still have questions, who maybe need information, still follow the Ministry of Education's Facebook page. The Department of Public Information, I think, also would have published the schedule, and the People's Progressive Party civic page, I think, published. I will also share them on my page. So on social media, you're going to get the schedule, you know the area where you are and when the team will be coming there. So, Minister, again, I want to say thank you so much for joining me this evening. I called you today. I heard you talking to about 15 different people. Like, I can understand how busy you were. And to take time out of that kind of schedule to be here, we're most grateful and we want to thank you so much. And to our viewers, we want to say thanks for joining us. We're going to be back with you, I think, in the very near future as we continue to bring to you programs of this nature.